We're live at JPM 2018. As always, the rain is not failing to join us. But we also have Atif with us this morning from Volvo, Chief Digital Officer of Volvo and Head of all of IT.
Great to be here.
Thank you for being with us, Atif. Really excited to speak with you again. Let me start by asking you around the theme of digital disruption. You're one of those folks that have lived through and have really driven digital disruption in industry over industry at Yahoo, at Amazon, at McDonald's, and now in the car industry with Volvo. Tell me about what your experience has been in the auto industry so far, especially given the regulated environment and the very long product development life cycles akin to healthcare.
Well, it's no secret there's a lot of change going on in the automotive sector. In fact, it's kind of a perfect storm. The product is changing, and the way in which people get their hands on cars and the way they want to experience rides is also changing. So there's a ton of change going on. That means there's a great opportunity to invent and come up with new ideas. So it's a perfect opportunity to take the customer experience forward. An important part of that is actually changing how you build things inside your company, your core product development, and that's one of the big things that needs to change and that we're working on. That's sort of what you were referring to with the long lead times, and now we're playing by the rules of software. So that's a very different thing, and it spells a lot of change for companies in the industry.
Yeah. And if you sort of reflect back on early successes and early failures, which I'm sure you're proud of as well when you're trying to innovate, what are maybe one or two things that you would highlight as some real ahas that you think our audience would also learn from?
Well, I think the main thing you have to do in the beginning is paint a picture of what good looks like. So a lot of times in an existing industry, companies look around at the other incumbents and they compare themselves against that. And that's entirely different than saying, how big can we really think about the customer need and opportunity and experience to really paint that picture? So I have found personally that it goes well when we're able to paint that picture and get the company on board with that. So you might call that the evangelism piece. From there, I think getting some quick wins is really important. And there, I think you need to work through the existing sort of setup of the company. Mm-hmm. So really work through the core and get people who have been in the company and may not be familiar with these new rules of software and how to innovate at the clock speed of a tech company on board to get something out the door fairly quickly so you can establish momentum. And I think that's an area where it's gone well, that's what we've done. And when we've fallen a little bit short, it's because we lost sight of that a little bit.
And I appreciate your comment around looking at what your peers are doing. And I think in my experience in healthcare, I see a lot of that the pharmaceutical and med tech companies are really comparing themselves against each other from a digital perspective in particular. And to your point, that might not be the right bar, especially when you see some of the massive disruptions that have happened in auto through the likes of Tesla and Google. Do you see that analogy extending into healthcare? Recognizing that that's not your area of expertise, but your area of expertise again is digital disruption. So, what do you think are the foundations of why it could or could not extend into what pharma and medtech is doing?
I think it's a great question, Cal. You mentioned Tesla. It's a very public example of looking at incumbents as opposed to thinking big about the marketplace and the customer. And I think while you can't control who your competitors will be, you can control how big you're thinking about doing and innovating on behalf of that customer and that customer obsession. And I think that's really what the lesson is here for all industries, is we can't predict the future, but we can focus on what we can exert control on, and that is those things that we are talking about around the customer experience. And that, I think, is the lesson for every industry and vertical.
Let me ask you about one of my personal favorite topics when I talk about the auto industry, and just get your insider view on it, and how auto is thinking about this differently today. So I talk a lot about the GPS. And I could just imagine 7, 8, 10 years ago, the auto industry incumbents saying, we're digital. Look, we're building all these great GPS systems. And when I'm out giving talks and I ask people to raise their hands and say how many people have a GPS in their car, everybody does. And then I ask the natural follow-up question, how many of you use the GPS in your car versus the one on your phone? And it's usually about 10% of the people. So here's this massive investment made by the auto industry to help bring a very important feature to their product that is essentially not used at scale, and they got totally trumpeted by the likes of Google and Apple on that front. Is that a valid analogy in terms of pointing out sort of just because you're doing digital doesn't mean you're doing it right? And what has auto learned from that today?
In fact, I think that's a very prominent example. That has been a big trap for companies. So to your point, people have become accustomed to the fact that they step in the cars and automatically their capability goes down. They get reduced functionality compared to what's on their phone, and therefore they don't use something that they probably paid a lot for and that they were upsold on. And that's not a win-win for anybody. The customer paid for something they're not getting value out of, and the company is not really building up their customer satisfaction and their brand reputation. So we have thought a little bit differently about that. We have decided to use a native version of Android and put that in our cars. And what that means in practice is that when the Google Map updates on the phone, it updates in that car at the exact same time. So you always have equivalent functionality. Now that might be a little bit scary to some companies because they might be thinking, well, what contribution are we making? What's the differentiation? And I think that's really just a matter of creativity. So to give you a quick example, if you have a native version of Android in your car, what you also know a little bit about is your calendar and the commitments that user might have. So imagine a scenario where it's late at night, the fuel level is low, there's an early morning meeting like we had here today, and you're going to need a fuel up in the morning. That might cause a lot of stress. But as a car company, you can kind of combine that information and take that stress out of the equation, maybe dispatch a refuel the previous night. So I really think it's a matter of our own imaginations and creativity that's holding us back. And what you use with the navigation systems is probably the most prominent example of that. So there is this opportunity to work with other companies in the tech space and also differentiate.
That's a great example that you're giving around how you see the future being reimagined around the GPS. Let me move you to the literal physical overlap between healthcare and auto. So when you think about the future car and what it can mean for your health, what are some of the ideas that are being brainstormed in the industry today?
Well, very pragmatically, we have some things that are possible today. We look at driving behavior and we try our best to detect drowsiness or whether someone is intoxicated. And we try and nudge the user or the driver to kind of fix and remedy that problem, maybe by slowing down or pulling over. And you can imagine that going to the next level when cameras are inside cars. And that's something Volvo is working on with new products. But if we think further ahead, the car is a really interesting thing because while sometimes you ride with other people, in a lot of cases you're solo. And if you're in what I think is a very serene environment of a Volvo, it's almost like a personal cabin. And you begin to ask yourself, well, what can you do in that, even if it's just a few fleeting moments a day, what can you do to take advantage of that? And I think personally that health and taking care of yourself could be a big part of that. There's a lot of sensors in cars already. So can we do things around personal health monitoring and really be that opportunity, a really frequent opportunity for you to know how you're doing and then to really plant the seeds in your head around how you have to take care of yourself and really manage your health. I think the car, especially when you think further ahead around autonomous drive, now you have that personal time and making it work for you around your health. There's probably some really big opportunities there.
Thank you, Atif. One last question for you here. You're sitting at the largest healthcare conference, investor conference in the world annually. San Francisco is flooded by the who's who of healthcare. If you had an opportunity to speak to them in terms of parting advice over the next 10, 15 years as digital disruption comes through this industry, what would be your parting thoughts for them?
I would say that the how is just as important as the what. People like you and me, Kal, for us, the what is comes probably pretty naturally. Okay, this is what the world will look like in 5 years. These are what customers and consumers will be able to do. And that's not easy, but it's only half the equation. The other half is how does work get done inside the company? So my advice would be to really dig in and follow the flow of any given idea and see how that work's getting done today and how you need to maybe restructure that for more agility. Because it's really the fast to, as they say, the fast eat the slow. And really, how is that set up and work getting done in the organization to promote working at the clock speed of software? That would be where I would put some real focus.
Thank you, Atif. Best of luck to you in 2018 and to Volvo Group. Appreciate your time.
Same to you.
Thank you.